Jane Elizabeth Andrews was born on April 1st, 1967, in Cleethorpes, Lincolnshire, as the youngest of three children of a working-class family. Her mother worked as a social worker, and her father was a carpenter. Although both parents had stable professions, making ends meet was a constant struggle, which created significant tension at home. While her mother maintained steady employment throughout Jane's childhood, her father's work as a carpenter was more unpredictable, fluctuating with the seasons. During slower periods, he would often find himself out of work, leaving the family reliant solely on her mother's paycheck. Because of this financial instability, the family could not afford many luxuries such as vacations, new clothes, or outings to the cinema, things that other children took for granted. Another critical aspect of the Andrews family dynamic was their reluctance to share their problems with others. If they struggled to pay the bills, dealt with home repairs, or faced mounting debts, they never confided in anyone or sought help. Asking for assistance was seen as a sign of weakness, and they maintained a stoic front, silently enduring their hardships. Expressing emotions was considered a vulnerability, and anything that happened at home was to be kept private. They simply toughed it out and moved forward. This way of life would have a profound impact on Jane, especially as she reached the age of Egypt. At that time, the family faced a severe financial setback, forcing them to relocate to a much smaller house in Grimsby. The new home was so modest that it didn't even have an indoor bathroom, requiring them to go outside and share facilities with their neighbors. This period of hardship cemented Jane's dream. She was determined to become rich and successful, to mingle with the elite, and to live the life of a millionaire. Though it might seem like a naive aspiration for Jane, this goal became paramount. She longed to be wealthy, famous, and respected, and she saw her hobby sewing as her path to achieving that dream. Some sources suggest that Jane's mother owned a sewing machine and taught her daughter to use it from an early age, showing her how to make patches and repairs. For Jane, sewing became her escape route. She attended Hereford High School, where she was reportedly a responsible, intelligent student who earned good grades. However, at the age of 15, Jane began skipping classes. While accounts vary, the most commonly repeated version is that she skipped school to devote herself to sewing. In her mind, the more she sewed, the more she learned, the more designs she created, the faster she would be able to leave her difficult life behind. Sewing, she believed, would make her rich and respected, offering an escape from the hardships that weighed so heavily on her. Despite her outward determination, Jane was internally struggling. She was just 15, a child who didn't truly understand what she was up against. Beneath her drive was fear. She began to suffer from panic attacks, depression, and eating disorders, but true to her upbringing, she kept all of this bottled up inside. Unable to confide in anyone, she bore her pain in silence. Jane suffered in silence, bottling up her emotions until one day she simply couldn't bear it any longer. When she walked through the door, her mother confronted her. What ensued was an intense argument filled with shouting and disrespect on both sides. Overwhelmed, Jane retreated to the bathroom, grabbed a handful of pills, and attempted to end her life. There are two versions of what happened next. The first suggests that her mother, realizing what Jane had done, tried to help in any way she could. The second, however, paints a darker picture. Her mother, seeing Jane in a semi-conscious state, chose to let her suffer, as the family had a strict rule against airing their problems to others. Acknowledging Jane's suicide attempt to the outside world would have been unthinkable. In their household, asking for help was simply not an option. Although Jane eventually recovered physically, she remained emotionally scarred. Around the age of 15, she began dating her first boyfriend. Deeply insecure, she agreed to his requests for intimacy, even though she didn't feel ready. Afraid of losing him, she ignored her own discomfort and continued to submit to his demands. She didn't want to, but so he wouldn't leave her, she gave in, and little by little she gave in to more and more things. Uncomfortable practices that didn't make her feel good, that made her feel humiliated, and finally practices without precautions. Finally, practices without protection, Jane became pregnant at the age of 17. Faced with the choice of either continuing the pregnancy and dealing with the consequences or having an abortion to pursue her dreams, she ultimately chose to terminate the pregnancy. This decision, in her own words, was deeply traumatic. Determined to take her life more seriously, Jane graduated from high school and enrolled in a fashion course at Brimsley College of Art. She then took a job designing children's clothing at Marks & Spencer. Although she enjoyed working with fabric, she found the job unsatisfactory as it did not align with her aspirations of wealth and status. Realizing that she needed to live as if she had already achieved her desired lifestyle, Jane began to immerse herself in the world of high fashion. She purchased fashion magazines daily and meticulously replicated the styles she admired: dresses, hats, jewelry, transforming her appearance from the humble, insecure Jane into a completely different person. At the age of 21, her life took a dramatic turn. She went to the usual newsstand and bought Ladies Magazine. When she got home, she headed straight to the classifieds section where she found a job offer she couldn't ignore. It seemed someone was anonymously seeking a personal wardrobe assistant, a position much better paid than her current job. Moreover, the job was located in London, a city she had always dreamed of moving to, with a luxurious apartment and the best views where she could host parties. She applied for the position, and for months she received no response. No one would have expected her to be contacted. Half a year passed with no word, but Jane imagined herself in that job every day, envisioning her life in London with her dream job, respected, elegant, and wealthy. Finally, months later, her phone rang, and she was told not only had she been selected, but she would also be working for Sarah Ferguson. Sarah Margaret Ferguson, known in England as Sarah Ferguson, was born on October 15, 1959. By 1988, she was one of the most famous and beloved members of the royal family. In 1986, she married Prince Andrew, who at that time had not been involved in any scandals. 2 years later, she was pregnant with their first daughter, Beatrice. However, the press quickly began to criticize her, attacking her weight gain, her style, and her clothing choices. Desperate for help, she turned to the lady for assistance. Several girls applied for the job, including Jane Andrews. The position was demanding, ensuring that dresses were not torn or stained and being with Sarah without drawing attention. Jane had to be Sarah's shadow, remaining unobtrusive and polite, adhering to strict dress protocols regarding skirt length, sleeves, and colors. Additionally, she had to adapt to Sarah's personal style. It was a complicated and demanding job, but Jane accepted it because deep down she saw it as her chance to leave her old life behind in Grimsby. She packed her bags and moved directly to Buckingham Palace, where she would stay temporarily until finding an apartment in London. Upon arrival and starting work, she met Sarah, and they immediately hit it off. In a short time, Jane underwent a complete transformation. She became the perfect employee and the ideal shadow, following Sarah everywhere, dressing like her, acting like her, and even laughing like her. Soon, friends and family felt that the Jane they knew was gone. Her old environment no longer accepted her, they no longer recognized her. Yet, the new environment also didn't accept her because they viewed her as a commoner due to her accent, behavior, and attire. No matter how much she tried, she couldn't fully integrate into the elite. Jane did her best to change completely. She enrolled in speech and etiquette classes, and as unbelievable as it may seem, Sarah Ferguson became her closest friend. Despite this, the tabloids were highly critical of Jane, frequently publishing pictures of Sarah in the same clothes and style, portraying Jane as a typical copycat without any personality. Ferguson valued Jane highly, not only because they shared similar tastes and hobbies, but also due to their mutual understanding of pain. Since Sarah married Prince Andrew, she saw him only 40 days a year, leaving her feeling lonely, abandoned, and misunderstood. The press continually criticized her and pitted her against Jane, intensifying her feelings of isolation and hurt. Jane experienced similar rejection from the elite, making their friendship even more meaningful. A year after Jane started working for Sarah in 1989, she began a relationship with Christopher Don Butler, an executive 21 years her senior. Their relationship was so intense that they got married and moved in together within 3 months. However, as the years passed, Jane grew bored and began seeking other lovers. When Christopher discovered this, they divorced. At the same time, Sarah Ferguson also went through a divorce. Their lives seemed eerily parallel. In early 1992, Sarah and Andrew were facing a rough patch. He was frequently away from home due to royal and naval duties, and Sarah was often seen with other men, including millionaire Steve Wyatt from Texas. The press constantly photographed Sarah and Steve together, making headlines. In August 1992, the Daily Mirror published scandalous photos of Sarah with John Bryan, an American financial administrator who was seen licking her feet. These images, along with previous rumors and photos of her with other men, created a massive scandal. The press blamed Sarah for the divorce, accusing her of infidelity, partying, and manipulation. They demanded her removal from the royal family and sought to strip her of the allowance she received as a member of the family. After the divorce, Sarah Ferguson faced the loss of her royal allowance and had to make significant cutbacks, including laying off many of her staff. Despite this, Jane was considered untouchable and was not dismissed. They continued to be best friends, always together and sharing everything. Over time, Jane met Dimitri Horn, the son of a Greek shipping magnate. However, Dimitri soon noticed Jane's unstable behavior. She was intensely happy and in love one moment, and filled with hatred the next. One day, Dmitri decided to end their relationship, but he did so within her apartment. This triggered a violent outburst from Jane. She threw objects against the walls and floor, completely losing control. Despite her dramatic reaction, Dmitri remained firm and left her, breaking up with her and forcing her out of the apartment. Jane, devastated, threatened to take her own life by swallowing a large number of pills. Fortunately, she survived. The press, eager to exploit the story, published what they knew, but soon found something even more intriguing. Jane Andrews was accused of stealing piece $250,000 worth of jewelry. There was confusion about the exact amount, with some sources stating piece $200,000 and others piece $250,000, but regardless, it was a significant sum. The scandal spread worldwide. Sarah Ferguson on a business trip had taken valuable jewels with her, which went missing upon arrival. Jane, who was responsible for the jewels, was accused of theft and branded as a thief and a bad person. The press fabricated a narrative that Jane, always copying Sarah, was somehow involved. In reality, Jane was innocent. The jewels were stolen by an airport employee, not her. The scandal intensified the tension between Jane and Sarah, leading to Jane's dismissal in 1997. The official reason was budget cuts, making Jane expendable. However, unofficially, it was rumored that Sarah was jealous or frustrated with Jane. By then, Sarah was reportedly infatuated with an Italian count named Gerard Desca. As Sarah and Gerard began to flirt and date, Jane seemed to reciprocate Gerard's interest, adding further complications to the situation. After Sarah Ferguson expelled her from her life, Jane lost everything she had dreamt of. She was unemployed, without her best friend, and once again a commoner. This plunged her into a deep depression until August 1998, when she met Thomas Ashley Chrisman, a former stockbroker with one of the most impressive fortunes in London. Jane was immediately captivated by Tom, who ran a successful car accessory business and was connected with London's elite. For Jane, Tom represented a dream come true, and she began to fantasize about marrying him and having children. However, Tom initially did not view her as a serious prospect. He saw her more as a lover and a casual friend rather than a future partner. They started dating, enjoying each other's company, attending social events, and Jane continued to work various jobs, including stints at a chain of jewelry stores in the Claridge Hotel. Despite her efforts, Jane craved status, and Tom seemed to offer that. During one of their outings, Jane stumbled and fell, breaking her wrist. She complained of significant pain, and feeling guilty, Tom invited her to live with him in his luxurious apartment in Fulham, one of London's most sought-after neighborhoods. Jane was thrilled with the new apartment and the renewed sense of status. Although Tom's friends suspected she might be exaggerating her pain and manipulating Tom, Jane relished her new life. She hoped that by living together and proving her commitment, she could eventually persuade Tom to marry her. She believed that with persistence, he would eventually relent. Unfortunately, their relationship soon soured. Frequent arguments and threats became commonplace. Jane confided many of her secrets, including those about the royals, to Tom. In turn, Tom threatened to expose these secrets to the press. Jane, however, was not easily intimidated and had her own set of unorthodox secrets. As tensions escalated, both threatened to reveal each other's private matters, turning the relationship into a contentious and unstable situation. Jane went so far as to accuse Tom of physical abuse, claiming that he beat and humiliated her, subjecting her to various forms of mistreatment. She later revised her story, saying that the fall while dancing was not accidental but the result of a fight in which Tom pushed her against the crockery, causing her to break her wrist. Tom's friends and family vehemently denied these allegations, describing him as a kind and respectful man who had never mistreated any of his partners. They insisted that the only issue with Tom was his unwillingness to commit to marriage or have children, which he had always made clear. Despite Tom's protestations, Jane continued to dig into his affairs. She discovered that Tom had been corresponding with another woman, Deborah DeMichael, whom he had met at a conference in Las Vegas. Their communication, which started as professional and cordial, soon turned intimate, with some sources even claiming that they exchanged provocative photos. One particular message Tom sent to Deborah read, "My girlfriend is becoming a bit like that pair of slippers that you can't throw away." In some respects, this is good. In others, it's bad. Jane was deeply hurt by this message, but instead of ending the relationship, she printed out all the evidence and confronted Tom, giving him an ultimatum: marry her within 7 months or the relationship would end. Remarkably, they planned a romantic trip to Italy to resolve their issues. Initially, the trip seemed perfect, filled with romantic sights and luxury accommodations, including visits to Tom's parents. However, as the days passed, Tom did not propose. Jane's frustration grew and she became increasingly nervous and irritable. She began making demands, and Tom responded by reiterating his refusal to marry her or have children. Jane's desperation led her to steal a car and threatened to drive off a cliff, ultimately threatening to take her own life. Upon returning home, their situation deteriorated further. On the morning of September 17th, 2000, Jane calmly suggested couples therapy, but Tom refused. He insisted that the problem lay with Jane, not him, and that she needed therapy to address her issues. This confrontation led Tom to end the relationship, demanding that Jane leave his house and his life immediately. The argument escalated to the point where Tom called the police, pleading for help, but unfortunately, no one responded to his call. On the morning of Monday, September 18th, 2000, one of Tom's employees who had been trying to reach him for several days went to his house. The front door was unlocked, which immediately raised concerns. Then the employee searched the downstairs and, finding nothing, proceeded upstairs. The scene he encountered in the master bedroom was horrifying. Tom was lying in a pool of dried blood. The autopsy revealed that Tom had been struck multiple times in the face and chest with a cricket bat, and then fatally stabbed in the chest with a 19-cm knife. The cricket bat was found leaning against the wall, and the knife was next to the body. It appeared that the weapons were readily available. The bat belonged to Tom and was kept in the closet, while the knife was from the kitchen. It seemed that someone had attacked Tom, beaten him into a semi-conscious state, then gone to the kitchen to grab the knife and stabbed him repeatedly with personal rage and deep hatred. Tom was found naked, suggesting that the attack occurred during an intimate moment and that the assailant was someone he trusted, perhaps a lover or partner. The police began searching for Jane Andrews, Tom's supposed girlfriend, but her car was missing from the front of the building. During their investigation, the police found 2 notes written by Jane in the kitchen. The notes read, "My dear parents, I am so sorry. I don't feel any more pain inside me. Tom hurt me so much. He was very cruel to me." The police were left with 2 possibilities. Either Jane had been kidnapped and forced to write the notes, or she was the culprit. The news spread rapidly, with the entire country eager to learn about her whereabouts and the details of the crime. Sarah Ferguson, who was Jane's former best friend, was also in the spotlight. The pressure became so intense that Sarah issued a public statement urging Jane to turn herself into the police. However, Jane Andrews did not respond. Sarah tried calling Jane multiple times, but Jane didn't answer. Instead, she sent texts and communicated with others, feigning ignorance about the situation. She pretended to have dementia, claiming she didn't know what was happening or how Tom was doing. Eventually, a friend managed to speak with her on the phone and learned that Jane was contemplating suicide. Jane confessed that she had taken an excessive amount of pills and was in a car, indicating that her death was imminent. The police traced the call and located Jane at a service area near Cornwall. Initially, those who found her car believed she was dead as she was slumped over the steering wheel. However, when they approached the vehicle and knocked on the window, Jane stirred, revealing she was not dead but merely asleep. She was then transported to the nearest hospital, where she spent a few days recovering before being transferred to a police station and formally charged with murder. Throughout the investigation, Jane altered her story multiple times, but consistently portrayed herself as the victim. She claimed Tom had mistreated and humiliated her. Initially, she denied any involvement in his death, but later confessed to killing him. However, her confessions were inconsistent and filled with gaps. The trial began on April 23, 2001 at the Old Bailey. Various witnesses presented conflicting testimonies. When it was Jane's turn to testify, the world was shocked. She described an incident where, after an emergency call, Tom lost his temper and assaulted her. Following this, he pushed her onto the bed, and then she claimed to have lost her sanity. Once Tom released her, Jane locked herself in the closet. Tom followed, sat on the door of the stool, and refused to let her out. Jane recounted telling Tom about her past experiences and grievances, which she claimed was meant to insult him further. She expressed that she never intended to marry him and had grown to despise him over the past 2 years. She ultimately convinced him to let her out, and when he did, she fled with no intention of returning. Jane had no intention of returning. She simply grabbed the keys, got into the car, and fled. For several hours, she and Tom continued to exchange threatening messages and phone calls. Jane sent all the emails Tom had exchanged with Deborah to his parents and even faxed them to Deborah's workplace. Despite her earlier insistence on not coming back, she eventually did return. Tom, as usual, welcomed her as if nothing had happened, and the atmosphere remained calm until she accidentally dropped a glass of water on the floor. From that moment on, Tom erupted again. At bedtime, they were still sharing the same bed. When Tom attempted to put Jane back to bed, she resisted. During the struggle, she fled, but later returned with several weapons, a cricket bat and a knife. She lay down next to Tom and fell asleep. When Tom woke up, he attacked her once more. According to Jane, in the ensuing chaos, she grabbed the bat and fought back. In a frenzied moment, she struck him with the bat, then stabbed him with the knife. Jane claimed that Tom had initially threatened her with the knife and that she only acted in self-defense, stabbing him repeatedly while he was on top of her. After the attack, she simply fled. Tom's family did not believe Jane's version of events, and the prosecution was even more skeptical. Tom had been stabbed multiple times, leading to a quick verdict. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty and sentenced her to life imprisonment. In 2001, psychiatrist Trevor Turner diagnosed Jane with borderline personality disorder. This diagnosis was intended to explain the extreme mood swings and behavioral changes, but it did not justify her crime. The psychiatrist emphasized that the disorder did not excuse her actions. Jane was imprisoned and served her sentence until she was paroled in 2009. However, shortly after being granted parole, she escaped. The police eventually tracked her down in a hotel with her family and returned her to prison. While incarcerated, she began a correspondence relationship with another man. In prison, Jane began a correspondence with another inmate. They exchanged affectionate words, and Jane referred to him as my husband. However, once he was released, he sold their story to the media, painting Jane as unstable. After his release, Jane sought to start anew. She found a job at a market selling antique items, supposedly from royalty, under a different name to avoid recognition. Unfortunately, her true identity was eventually revealed, and she disappeared in 2018. Jane started a new relationship, but when her new partner discovered her true identity, he reported her to the police for stalking. This accusation was never substantiated and seemed to be an excuse to end the relationship. Jane was arrested again in 2019. The police investigated thoroughly, but it was discovered that the stalking accusation was false. With no further information available about her current status, the case remains unresolved. What do you think about Jane's case? Do you believe the outcome was fair? If you found this case interesting, please give the video a thumbs up and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Do you think Jane deserved a second chance, or do you believe she will never change? See you in the next video. Bye.